Good evening, everyone. My name is Ernie Quiroz. Ooh, I'm a little blurry. Let's see if I can make that a little in focus. Uh, ooh, okay. Well, hopefully the camera. There we go. Now we're in focus. My name is Ernie Quiroz. I am the Cines Infanteros programmer here at Milwaukee Film. Thank you so much for joining us for this member Q&A after the member screening of the film Los Hermanos. We will talk to the co-directors just in a little bit. Have a couple of quick announcements for you guys. First of all, thank you so much for being a member of Milwaukee Film. We really couldn't do what we do without your help, without your support, both financially and in spreading the word about our mission here at Milwaukee Film, which is to bring great films from around the world to the good people of Milwaukee. So thank you for that. I want to also announce that we will be doing some programming for Hispanic Heritage Month. I am currently in the works of sort of putting together a slate of films, of Latinx Hispanic films, coming to you in September in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. So I'm super excited about that. Nothing officially to announce yet, so keep an eye out on your email for when we are ready to announce events and lineup. It will be a hybrid edition with some in-person and virtual events. In person, because in just a couple of weeks, fingers crossed, everything goes well, we are planning to reopen the Oriental Theater. So I'm sure you've seen the announcements for that. So we're super excited to welcome you back into the real world, into the real space of the Oriental Theater, with some great remodel, great looking new Oriental Theater. So that'll be a hybrid edition of some programming for Hispanic Heritage Month. So keep an eye out for that. So I want to go ahead and bring out co-directors of the film Los Hermanos. We have Marsha and Ken, both calling in from the Bay Area. Marsha and Ken, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for letting us show this film, wonderful film, Los Hermanos, to our members.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ernie. Great to be here.
Yeah. Talk a little bit. Well, there's so much to talk about. It's hard to figure out where to start. But let's start maybe at the end, or let's start with some updates on, your film ends kind of during the Trump era a little bit. So get us caught up on sort of what's happened since then. Since Biden's taken office, Cuba's in the news. I'm sure everyone's been watching just the last couple of weeks. Some political unrest in Cuba. There's a lot has happened since you finished the film. Give us some updates on the brothers, on Cuba, on what's going on.
You want to start with the politics and I'll talk about the brothers?
Sure. So we're hearing from our friends that things are very hard there. We're also hearing very clearly that what we hear on the news is, not surprisingly, not the whole story. There is definitely a sense of desperation because there are food shortages and there's medicine shortages. And there's some frustration with a very weak infrastructure. There's a lot of frustration. There's a desire to end the embargo, which also very much impacts the possibility of getting food and medicine into the island. Our brothers and our community there are safe. They have seen the protests. They have not been endangered by it, but pretty much everybody we talk to has pleaded for nonviolent and constructive responses to a very difficult moment. And Cuba is an island of survivors, and this too will pass, and they know that. And in spite of that, I get almost daily posts on my Facebook page of both Aldo, who still lives in Havana, and his students and his colleagues who are performing. They're posting music on Facebook. They're still doing and sharing their art.
And there are ways, like one of the big shortages there now are there are not enough syringes. They made their own vaccine. They have that, but they don't have enough syringes. So there are various campaigns to get things to them through Spain, if anyone's interested in supporting that. And then in terms of the brothers, we were very fortunate to see Aldo here in Northern California, I think just last week or the week before. He had 2 live performances in the US in the last few months. So he was able, after not being able to get here during the Trump era, to get a visa to be able to perform. And he and Ilmar will be on tour starting next fall, on and off through for the next few months. So that part of things seems to be getting easier during the Biden administration. But generally, the feeling is that nothing is going to change in terms of US policy until after the midterms because of the politics of Florida.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, well, if people wanted to follow the brothers and their music and maybe keep an eye on concert dates or anything, do you have any websites?
Sure. So, so they each have their own websites. The Aldo Musica, and we could give you the links to send around. And Ilmar's Harlem Quartet, they have their own website. But we also have on the film's website a listen page where we have links to a lot of fantastic music. Some of it's in the film and a lot of it isn't. So you can learn more about the brothers and their music there. And our website is Hermanos Brothers Film .info, and there's a listen page.
Very cool. Very cool. One of the great things that I found on your website about the film, I'm not sure who wrote this, but it's just wonderful. I just want to read it real quickly. Those who stayed, like Aldo, love their country and criticize it. Those who left, like Ilmar, love their country and criticize it. Can you talk about that from both perspectives of their relationship with Cuba? We see that in the film, but like we said, since the completion of the film and with the new unrest, talk about their feelings and their hopes and dreams for Cuba.
Well, that's a really good question, Ernie. And if we sort of take a wide-angle view of that, there's theories about immigration and the lives of immigrants where they are really belong to both and neither place. And even the Cubans in Miami, who are so vociferously anti-Castro and anti-socialist and anti-Cuba, have a love of the island and miss the life that they once lived on the island. So I think that's in that way, Cuba is not really a special case. Our friends from Mexico or Honduras or or Sweden also feel that sort of pull of home. And though we found it very strong that these two brothers felt that way, both about their own country and about each other's country. And that was a surprise to us. We expected more political heat within the family. And there's a little bit which you see in the movie, but mostly the loss that they feel is that they're not allowed to be together. And that is something that's distinctive to Cuba. That makes Cuba kind of a sui generis, one of a kind, because other immigrants can, given the resources and the time, travel back to visit their home countries. And that's been difficult on and off the past 60 years because of the U.S. embargo.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that was interesting in making the film is that in some ways the U.S. and Cuba seem like they're like inverted realities. So the things that work well here don't work well there, and vice versa. And I think through the brothers and their take on their own countries and their brothers' countries, you see how complicated and nuanced all of this is. And we don't always get that perspective that, people coming from the outside, even from Cuba, a country that has very few resources, they take a look at some of the things that are happening in the inner cities here and they think, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's easy to put it all on Cuba, but it's actually it's a mirror to us here too.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about for people that don't know. You have been making films in and about Cuba for a long time now, so you have I think, a unique insight into Cuba. Talk about maybe your personal feelings, hopes for Cuba relations with the U.S. in the future. I mean, will the embargo ever be lifted? Like you said, things might not change until the midterm elections. What's the hope?
Well, that's, I mean, the obvious hope is that, that this ceases to be an issue of internecine American politics. The fate of Cuba and its relationship to the U.S. and its ability to trade, not just with the U.S. but with other countries, because the embargo has a punitive aspect to it. Other countries are disincentivized to trade with Cuba by U.S. policy. So we would hope that electoral politics no longer is decisive in this matter. That we apply sort of a friendly neighbor policy towards Cuba like we have towards other nations, whether they are perfect or imperfect, and of course none of them are perfect. So that's really my hope, is that we get out of this 60-year loop of demanding that this other nation accede to our wishes, and I think that we'll see that Cuba will blossom in new ways. It's a very interesting country, and as you can tell from our film and from our film work, we're very compelled by the cultural space there. Cuba punches above its weight, not just in terms of this kind of music, which most people didn't know about Cuba's classical music culture, but also popular music and popular dance and visual art and theater. And one of my dreams, to answer your question, is that more people in our country have access to these art forms.
I'm wondering, have you had a chance to show the film in Cuba with an audience? What was their reaction? I know COVID, on top of everything else, and there's COVID, so many things going on. But have you seen it with an audience in Cuba?
So one of the heartaches of releasing a film, particularly a music film in this time, is that there have been very few screenings in theaters. But the film did play at the Havana Film Festival in one of Havana's biggest theaters with 5.1 sound, and Aldo was there, but we were not, sadly. But it was all social distanced and all that. But he got a standing ovation. So I think people appreciated it. And I think it will be on Cuban television eventually. So then it will be available for anyone to see there. And this family, it's a little bit hard for us to, I think, here, because there's so many people here to understand. I mean, people know them. Like when we were in the market with them, people they're kind of famous, their whole family, the dad and the both musicians, and now the daughters who also are performing as 12-year-olds. They're known. So a film about them is going to be something that people will be interested in.
Yeah. We'll talk about, let's go all the way back to the beginning then. How you came to meet the brothers, know the brothers, and what made you decide. Obviously a very compelling story, so probably wasn't too hard of a decision, but talk about the process of telling their story on screen.
I was in Cuba in, I think, December 2014, presenting our first Cuba film at the Havana Film Festival, which is a huge international festival. It's a great festival. And closing night of that festival coincided with opening night of Havana Jazz Fest, which is also a world-class music festival. And some Cuban friends invited me and said, "You got to see this guy. He's a great player." And they kind of had me from hello. So I went and I sat in the second or third row and saw this wild-haired 30-something pianist, and I was completely taken. I'm a music guy. We love music. I hadn't experienced this kind of music before. And so I introduced myself after the show, and we met, and it turns out we had some common friends, which isn't a surprise. It's a small island, and many artists collaborate, they know each other. So I came home a few days later and said to Marcia, "Hey, we've been thinking about our next Cuba story, and I saw this great concert. I want you to meet this guy. I think we got a movie." And Marcia said, "Okay, so what's the story here?"
And then we had the awesome opportunity to meet Ilmar in New York when we were showing something. And we had brunch with him, and you can imagine how delightful that was to meet him and hear him tell his stories. And at the end of brunch, he said, Aldo's coming to the US to play with my quartet for the first time. And we did not know that. And we looked at each other and we thought, okay, there's a story. Something's going to happen when the two of them, it's the first time that they're going to be able to tour together and collaborate musically in the US. And so 6 weeks later, we were shooting.
Wow, it happened that fast, huh?
Well, they were going to tour, so it's like if we're going to tell the story, we have to be on it.
Yeah.
And we had just run a crowdfunding campaign, because originally we were going to make a series of short films about artists in this time when things were opening up after Obama changed the rules. So we had we had this little pot of money from this Kickstarter that we had run for the series, and we just said, let's just spend it on this. And we thought we would make a short to begin with, but it was such a rich story and it kept unfolding, so we kept following it.
Yeah, so talk about, do you consider this a musical film, a political film? It's both, and it's sort of, how was it always both? Was there a debate of maybe you stay away from politics, or let's focus on the music? What was that process like?
Well, you've just basically summarized, the dramas that we grappled with in the early days of each of our Cuba films, including this one. There's no such thing as a Cuba film which does not have politics in it. At least, same thing. If you're making a film about Israel, Palestine, or Cuba, you cannot skirt past it. But we did decide that for us, the foreground was going to be heart, not head. The foreground was going to be the brothers, the family, the relationship, the emotion, the experience of them being rent apart and brought back together again. And the canvas against which it was painted was going to be the politics. So that was, once we decided that, it helped us in terms of the direction, what scenes to shoot, where to put our resources, and how to render the political history, which we tried to do as gently as possible.
I think it was always tricky to figure out exactly how much history we had to include for people to be able to follow the story, because there is no story without the politics, but the politics are not the story. And interestingly, we had two reviews, one from Europe, which said, loved the film, but I don't know why they had to put in that history. And one from New York that said, love the film, how come they didn't explain more about the history? So I think it all depends on what lens your country sees this story through. And it is tricky to figure out, where's the sweet spot?
That's another thing about that one is documentaries are always like Rorschach tests. So
again,
the documentary films are like Rorschach tests. They're like ink blots. So people will read into them based on their own life experience, and we also know that if we had put politics in the foreground, we're never we're going to satisfy a sector of viewers, but not everybody. And of course you can't please everybody, but there's something archetypal about the two brothers apart together, creating together, that was more compelling to us than focusing on politics. So the politics are essential. Without the politics, there's no story. Without the politics, they would not have been separated.
Yeah,
I think also just the music is like an ambassador to try and understand something we might not understand about the relationship between our countries. I mean, I think the music can reach a very broad audience because it's remarkable. And I think, people feel it in a way that maybe creates an opportunity to look at something slightly differently than you might have seen it before.
I did forget to mention to everyone who's watching, if you do have any questions, I just don't want it to be the three of us. If you have any questions out there, please type them in the chat window, and I'll try to work them in. We'll probably have about 5 to 7 more minutes as we wrap. So, but no, I think you guys struck the perfect balance between the political and the musical. You're never going to please everyone. And I think that's perfect. I mean, everyone is going to come to this film sort of with their own expectations of what this film is. And I'm sure you guys have played at a music festival and a documentary festival, and those audiences are going to be coming at it from very different angles. So I think finding that balance, you guys did a really great job of that. So
Thank you.
Talk about, go ahead.
We just said thank you.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, since we have time, about future projects that you're working on, either Cuba or non-Cuban related?
We do have a Cuba film in our back pocket that we are not really talking about yet. And we're each sort of involved with other projects. I have a short film that just went out on OpDocs last week called What You'll Remember, that I produced with a very talented young director, Erica Cohn. And Ken, you can talk about your work.
I'm also Ernie, I'm a full-time documentary editor. So between our grant cycles, I'm always editing somebody else's film. And right now I'm editing a piece which looks at indigenous communities throughout Latin America who are fighting against the efforts of transnational mining and logging companies to engage in projects on their on their territories, and that's called Water for Life. And we have actually, most documentary filmmakers will tell you that we're never short of ideas. So we do have the Cuba project, and we have another piece which actually starts from a relative of mine, and if we can tell the story, it will take us to some interesting spaces, some kind of having a big picture view around colonialism in Africa, and it will be a kind of a personal story, not about us, but starting from this relative of mine.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is that any filmmaker will tell you that when your film premieres, it's not over. We've and because of the pandemic, everything was delayed with this film. So we're still playing film festivals. We're doing a lot of screenings at music venues, and our film's going to be on public television in the fall. So there's a lot of work to do just getting it out the door before we can really turn our energy into something else.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing to talk about, though, is our engagement campaign, which for us has always been the most exciting aspect of distribution. It's where storytelling and community converge. And Marcia is.
So we're just briefly, we're doing, there's some wonderful organizations that are really doing work around diversity in classical music, thinking about who plays, who's in the audience, what music gets considered to be played. And our film is actually turning out to be a really good tool to have that conversation in communities and to put in front of young people who don't usually get to see musicians who look like these guys play at the level that they do, and be inspired by that as, as a possibility in their life. We're having a lot of fun with those screenings too.
Yeah, I can imagine. What I want to know, what was the family's response, both family here that has seen the film and the family back in Cuba that has seen the film? Not just Aldo and Ilmar, but everyone. And then what was their response to the film?
Well, we make a commitment to all the people the main subjects of our films, to always show them an advanced rough cut to make sure that we're getting the story right. So that can be a very satisfying or a harrowing experience. In this case, it was really interesting. Ilmar, the older brother, the violinist who lives in the States, he has natural instincts for marketing and for storytelling. So he had some really incisive ideas. Aldo looked at it and said, I want to talk to you about how you've edited my songs. So actually, Marsha and I were living in Cuba. We were teaching at a university program there, and Aldo came to our apartment where I had set up. I brought my editing system with us to Havana, and sat with me. We spent an afternoon re-editing some of his songs. There were some comical moments here because, of course, the needs of the film, which I'm concerned about, might be different from the needs of him as a composer. And there was one point of comic conflict where he insisted that I leave intact a very slow introduction to a song, which I thought was really going to destroy this scene, but we finally worked it out. And in terms of the end film, the response from the family has been very positive. Guido, the father, loved it, and he's always been very warm to us, and he's been very generous, both with his time when we were making the film and with his commentary afterwards. And both Aldo and Ilmar's families, their wives, were also skilled musicians, and their children who are, Ilmar's children are studying at a weekend program at Juilliard. Like Marsha mentioned, Aldo's twin daughters, they are already playing very high level, both piano, and one plays guitar, one's a flautist. And I'm sure they love seeing themselves on the big screen. And the community in Cuba who saw it, including musician friends of theirs who we share as friends, have been very positive about it too.
And one thing that Aldo has said in Q&As we've done together is that for them, it's a record of a really special time in their lives when they were able to be together a lot. So I think they respond a lot to the film in that very kind of personal, sort of emotional way too. They wouldn't have this kind of document of this opportunity they had to play together.
Yeah. Well, I've always felt that, if you want to learn about another culture, the best way is to listen to their music and to eat their food. That's the easiest, most fun way to experience culture. So I would suggest people watch this film and maybe get a Cubano or get some or drink a Cuba Libre afterwards. But thank you so much for sharing this film with us and bringing a little bit of Cuba to us and sharing both, like we said, the music and the politics of Cuba.
Thank you so much,
really
Arnie.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to have to recommend Mojito over Cuba Libre. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
It's a better cocktail.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again. We will keep an eye out for future films, Cuba projects or otherwise. Yeah, did you have a website?
Yeah. Do you want me to can I type it in? No. It's www.hermanosbrothersfilm.info. But if you just type in the name of the film, which is Los Hermanos / The Brothers, bilingual title, our website will come up. We don't have any competition there.
Very good. Yeah, we'll add that to the description in the video.
Thank you so much.
So that people can say.
Yeah, and I'll send you the links to the brothers' websites too. You can add them.
Awesome. Very good. We definitely want to stay up to date with what they're doing and what you guys are doing. So once again, thank you much for joining us. Thank you, everyone out there in the internet world, members, for watching. And we hope to see you in the theater in person, hopefully very, very, very soon. So good luck and keep in touch.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.